My dear friends, students of the third year, Cairo Higher Institute's English Division, it's my pleasure to welcome you once again through our CHI platform. Today, inshallah, we are going to continue what we started a couple of weeks ago concerning restoration drama and Congreve's The Way of the Wallet. Till now, we were introduced to the Restoration Age. We had its historical background in terms of its social, political, and scientific environments. We were introduced to William Congreve's lives and works. We had an idea about the characters we are going to meet in The Way of the Wallet. And today, inshallah, we are going to talk about the title of the play, The Way of the Wallet. Sometimes the cover page of the play gives you an idea about its content. Sometimes the cover page has a character's name. Mainly speaking, a hero's or a heroine's name. Today, we are going to see what does the way of the wallet mean. If you can see the way of the wallet as an expression is used on many different occasions. In addition to its first use, which is the title that appears on the cover page, we are going to have other occasions in the text where the term or the expression, the way of the wallet, is traced. If we look at the text of the play, we will notice that the way of the wallet as an expression appears once in Act 3 and twice in Act 5. In Act 3, I have a situation where Mr. Fainall and Mrs. Marwood are left alone on the stage. Mr. Fainall expresses to Mrs. Marwood that Fable, Lady Wishford's servant, Lady Wishford's maid, belongs to a lower class family. And he describes his state and his wife's as superior. He classifies people according to their social ranking. And that's why he says that this is according to the way of the wallet. In other words, he says that his classification is based on the classification of the community of London in 1700. As you can read, it is mentioned in Act 3 when Mr. Fainall and Mrs. Marwood are left alone on the stage. Mr. Fainall classifies Fable. Fable is, again, Lady Wishford's maid, as a lower class citizen whose respect is denied by society. At that time, prestige was given to the aristocratic members, not to the servants or the maids. And he classifies himself and his wife at the same time as fashionable, upper class citizens. He talks about his superiority as well as his wife's. He is satisfied that his classification doesn't give just a personal assessment that belongs to his own point of view and that's all, but he talks about the way people are classified in the way of the wallet of the London of the year 1700. And this is the quotation where the coining of the expression can be traced. And the expression, the way of the wallet, is highlighted in red. As the plot develops, as the actions of the play develops, the term the way of the wallet is mentioned again in Act 5. And here are two examples of mentioning the term or the expression the way of the wallet. Once again, we have the same two speakers, Mr. Fainall and Mrs. Marwood, but the situation is different. Now, Mrs. Marwood talks about her worries that Fievel and Mincing, who had listened to her private talk with Mr. Fainall, are going to talk to Lady Wishford about what they came to know. In other words, we had a secret plot between Mr. Fainall and Mrs. Marwood. Who listened to this plot? Fievel, Lady Wishford's maid, and Mincing, Millamant's maid. The two maids are expected, from Mrs. Marwood's point of view, to tell Lady Wishford about what they heard. At that particular moment, Mr. Fainall uses the expression, the way of the wallet, to try to calm Mrs. Marwood down. He tells her that, don't worry, even if the two maids are going to tell Lady Wishford everything, it's okay. It is the way of the wallet. And at the same time, he insists that he will never retreat. He will never abate any conditions he had raised against Lady Wishford. At the same time, this coining or this expression tells you how people think, how people act and react. And this is the quotation he uses, and again the expression, the way of the world, is highlighted in red. For the third time, the way of the wallet as an expression is used. But this time the speaker is not Mr. Fainall. The speaker now is Mirabell. Before Mr. Fainall got married to Arabella, who later on became Mrs. Fainall, she had given all her property in trust to Mirabell. This is due to some cautions raised against the bad temper of Mr. Fainall. When Mirabell discloses this secret and he tells Mr. Fainall about what happened before his marriage to Arabella, he tells him that this is done according to the way of the wallet of the widows at that time, when they can trust someone and try to be precautious towards someone else. And the quotation again is what you can read, and the third time in the text the way of the wallet is mentioned is again highlighted in red. So for the time being, we had the way of the wallet on the title page. We have twice the expression is used by Mr. Fainall and once by Mr. Mirabell. What is the significance of all these uses of this expression, especially when it becomes a central concept around which the play goes on and the plot develops, and the actors and actresses who represent the roles of the characters we have act and react? Thus, the play becomes a satire, an attack, but it is an attack to reform, about love and the way of the world, how love is treated with all its varieties, with all its kinds, how people act and react towards life, the motivations beyond their actions and reactions. It is the world of the wealthy in the London of the year 1700. And be careful that wealthy or the wealthy here refers to the middle upper class citizens. In other words, we are talking about the aristocratic families in the London of the year 1700. It dramatizes London as the heart of the world. At that time, London was the heart of the world, the fashionable and cultural capital of Europe at that time. Life in London was characterized by colorful characters, extreme fashion, new chocolate houses and parks. The chocolate houses where we have the first scene, and the parks illustrated by St. James Park where we have scene number 2. In the chocolate house we have the first beginning, the first game between Mirabell and Mr. Fainall. And when we go to St. James Park, we have the group of the ladies, where all can meet and gossip. So these are the ways of the world at the time. We have colorful characters, we have extreme fashion, new chocolate houses, and parks, where people can meet and gossip. They will talk about the tireless intrigues around love, marriage, adultery, and money. Again, we are going to talk about love with its varieties. We are going to talk about marriage and its circumstances. In this way, love and marriage, marriage and love, will constitute the fertile soil for private talks. Private talks illustrated by the talks of the Cable Night, which we came through, and the private talks among the gentlemen and the gentle young ladies. When we talk about the relationship between Congreve's world and the fictional world he builds up in the way of the world, you can trace a number of similarities, like superficial love and how it is criticized or in particular satirized. We have an attack on superficial love. There is superficial love between Mirabell and Lady Wishford on his behalf. We have a superficial love between Mr. Fainall and Mrs. Marwood, or to describe it in a very precise way, it is an illicit love. At the same time, in order to vex Mirabell, Millamant pretends that she loves someone else, not Mirabell. Mr. Fainall and Mrs. Marwood incarnate, they embody adultery and unfaithfulness. Mr. Fainall, who is Mrs. Fainall's husband, Arabella's husband, has a relationship with Mrs. Marwood. So he is not faithful to his wife. At the same time, although he pretends to be a friend to the Wishford's family, he will later on blackmail Lady Wishford and his wife. Mrs. Marwood, the pretending friend, again conspires against, or let me say, acts against the goodness of the Wishford's family. She is going to help Mr. Fainall in his plot against the Wishfords. Mr. Fainall's marriage to Mrs. Fainall is a business project on his behalf and a social shelter on her behalf. If you go back to the plot of the play, let's be reminded that when Mirabell tried to secure the future of his ex-mistress, Arabella, he tried to search for her, for a good reputed, a prestigious husband. And the role is played by Mr. Fainall. So Mirabell was the person who arranged Mr. Fainall's getting married to Arabella, and later on Arabella assumed the name of Mrs. Fainall. At the same time, Mrs. Fainall sought a shelter, sought with S, not with TH. For her, she needs a man's reputation to protect her against any scandalous exposures she might be subjected to if the people of London, if the community of London comes to know her ex-relationship with Mirabell. So I have a business project. Mr. Fainall tried to have money, and on the path he had to get married to Arabella. And for Arabella, she needed a man's name, a man's title, and that's why she agreed on marrying Mr. Fainall. But in reality, Mrs. Fainall despises her husband. She looks down upon him. She doesn't like him. She doesn't love him. And she declares on many occasions that she loves Mirabell without boundaries, without limitation. She was Mirabell's ex-mistress, and she is still in love with Mirabell, and that's why she is going to help him later on, and he is going to save her reputation, the reputation of her family as well by the end of the play. The way of the wallet at that time, so far marriage is concerned, covers another aspect, which is business marriage. And here, by business, we have the achievement of private goals. I had the arrangement of marriage. Mirabell succeeds in managing, in getting married, Waitwell, his servant, to Fievel, Lady Wishford's maid. And he was trying to carry out his plan to get married to Millamant. For Mirabell, he needs an eye in Lady Wishford's camp. He needs an eye that tells him how he may develop his plot. Not to act against the goodness of Lady Wishford, but mainly speaking, to help, to enable his love to Millamant to survive. So, again, this is another example of marriage Mirabell manages to arrange. As a part of the fashionable world of the Restoration period, we have legal time for marriage. This legal time starts at 8 a.m. and ends at noon. And it is indicated in the text by the footman. So again, this is the way of the wallet. It is a part of the social aspects of the way of the wallet at that time. Here I have an example related to marriage, especially if I'd like to have a legal marriage. Another example is the gossip among the people of London, that is foreshadowed by Lady Wishfort's cable knights. The knights, when they talk in private, but at public gatherings, at places for public gatherings, they talk about maybe the scandal of someone, the celebration of the destruction of someone's reputation, or any other talks that form a good content for gossip. And the cable knights is an example of what the restoration men and women were involved too, especially when we come to know that the main attendees are women, but these women, again, for fashion, just for fashion, must be accompanied by one or two men. Here we have the places of public gatherings, which are again represented by the chocolate house, where Mr. Fainall and Mirabel meet, and by St. James Park, where Mrs. Fainall and Mrs. Marwood gave their first appearance. If you remember that at that time, chocolate houses were places where aristocratic citizens used to go either to sip or drink chocolate or to buy it and take it home. While they are there, they can talk, they can enjoy some private talks and gossip. The way of the world at that time was dominated by pretense, by hypocrisy. What is said is not what is meant. The character may talk to one another. The characters may talk to one another, but they say something and they mean something else. And that's why we have lots of intrigues, lots of apparent and latent meanings. Here I have an example, which is the first dialogue between Mrs. Fainall and Mrs. Marwood. The two young ladies express their distaste of love. Each one declares she doesn't love. She is not in love. Love is far-fetched at that time. They show their hypocritical attitude towards love, but they still have a sense of love. Although they both express their dislike of love, Mrs. Fainall is still in love with Mirabel, and Mrs. Marwood is described in the dramatis personae by Mr. Congreve as likes or attracted to Mirabel. If you go back to the dramatis personae, the list of the characters' names, you will remember that each character was introduced in terms of either love affair or kinship. Here we have a description of Mrs. Marwood through a hint that she likes Mirabel. I have again an expression of love, but for the third, fourth, fifth time we have pretense, we have superficiality, something that is not real. This example tells you about Mrs. Marwood's expression of love and devotion to Lady Wishfort. And by the end of the play, it is proved that all her feelings towards the Wishfort's family are not real. They are superficial. Throughout the play, Mrs. Marwood pretends to be loyal to the Wishford's family. But at a certain moment, she helps Mr. Fainall to blackmail Lady Wishford. She acts against the welfare of the Wishford's family. And that particular moment proves that she is not a real friend of the family. Whereas Mirabel's intrigue to deceive Lady Wishford aims to bring him closer to Millamant, according to Mirabel's view, he doesn't harm Lady Wishford. He wants only to be close to Millamant. Mr. Fainall, on the other hand, directly blackmails Lady Wishford, and he becomes a direct threat to the whole family. So I have here two plots. One is acted by Mirabel, whereas the second is acted by Mr. Fainall. Which one is harmful? It is Mr. Fainall's. Which one constitutes a real danger to the family? It is, again, Mr. Fainall's plot. For him, for Mr. Fainall, money is everything. Materialistic gain is his main objective and goal. But in case of Mirabel, love is the central point, is the central focus he goes around. Because the world of the Restoration period is famous for the comedy of manners, Congreve's play is full of wit. The play is classified as a comedy of manners. And I told you before that Restoration comedy is a comedy of manners. In both cases, we have wit in the center. What is the meaning of wit? Wit, it is a combination of, a cocktail of intelligence, wisdom, smartness, and humor. And the main witty character can be Mirabel. Lots of Mirabel's expressions are full of wit. I will not talk about the witty characters who represent foolishness, but I'll talk about the character who is, number one, central, number two, witty, number four, initiates the actions, and number four is a character who develops the action or the dramatic incidents of the play. Mirabel represents, he incarnates sophisticated and fashionable wits. Those who are witty, who use wit as a cover for their expressions and talks to everyone, whose remarks and comments are ironical. Again, here we have irony. What is said is different from what is meant. He says something, but he means something else. In other words, he makes use of words. He manipulates words. And we have other sarcastic remarks or comments. With sarcasm, I have humorous attack through verbal talents, and sometimes cunning. He plays certain tricks, but be reminded that no one will be harmed, especially when we talk about the play as a comedy. We don't have deception that leads to bloodshed. We don't have deception that will lead to a murder or lead to someone's destruction. The play is a comedy, so it must end happily. While addressing Mr. Fainall, Mirabell wonders why there is no an act of the parliament that prohibits, that forbids the exportation of fools. Can fools be exported? This is the question he raised, and of course he is ironical. Again, the proviso scene, the scene of negotiating marriage between Millamant and Mirabell, has wit, because marriage turned to be a game. I'm not talking about the importance of the proviso scene or of the scene of negotiating marriage in terms of conditions, whether they are acceptable or not. I talk about wit that is used in a matter of exchange between Mirabell and Millamant. By the end of this lecture, I hope that we clarified in brief the importance or the significance of the title, The Way of the Wallet, and how it is used in the text of the play, what does it signify, and it's used by Congreve to tell you something, to tell us, his readers, something about the wallet of the London in 1700. I hope that today's expressions, today's terms, will try to draw or redraw the map that we are going to use while analyzing the text of the play. Each term has its significance. We talk about a wallet of wit, a wallet with fashion, a wallet with marriage as business projects, the wallet of chocolate houses and parks as places of public gatherings, the wallet of the fashion of the aristocratic families in London at that time, the wallet and its attitude towards love, marriage, and money, the wallets that show respect to good reputation and how it becomes a cover and a shelter for any upper class citizen who tries to receive social acceptability. A wallet that is full of appearance and reality, apparent meaning and latent meaning. A wallet that is criticized or satirized in order to reform it. When we attack certain aspects of follies or foolishness, we are trying in reality to rebuild this society according to moral standards. Okay? I hope by the end of this video you came to know the meaning of the way of the wallet, and inshallah starting next time we are going to read the text of the play, analyze it, and try to develop our skills of criticizing a text or a literary text in particular. For the time being, thank you so much, and I hope to see you soon, and goodbye.